Alright, let's talk about tank command in the AS2 editor. The first things I should say is that I've got my video settings to ultra, and I've got my audio to full buffers, 64 buffers.
Quite
If your
unexpected.
if your computer can handle this, it's worth it to have the textures cranked up all the way. Also, I'm running Rob's Realism mod, and that's pretty much the best thing you can do to AS2. Even in the editor, the gameplay is just so much better. So having said that, let's get working with tanks and how they function. Right now I have a soldier.
Go ahead.
He's a veteran tank commander, and since I had the fog of war turned on, you can see what he sees right now through his eyes as he gets up and moves around. If he rotates, you can see how his spotting view changes as his eye vision changes. Now, one of the most difficult parts of being a tank commander is vision and seeing around your tank, and if you can't see, it's very dangerous. So if I put him inside the tank, you'll see his vision change as he'll take command of the main gun. There's only one person in there, which means he can only do one thing at a time. His vision has now become just straightforward in a small sliver. As you can see, he's looking through the main gun, which is highlighted down here. You can tell he's looking through the main gun. His icon says he's looking through a gun. He just has a gun manned. So he's in a bit of a pickle if he's by himself. Anybody can flank around and do harm to the tank. So first of all, let's look at ways where we can change that vision to 360 degrees around a tank, which will be a lot safer for the crew as it goes through the battlefield. Now if I grab the other crew members, and you can see right now if I select a tank, it's only at 20% efficiency because there's only one tank commander in there. As soon as I bring the other crew members in, that'll go up to 100% because you need professional tank crew to get 100% efficiency out of your tanks. And if they're veteran professional tank crew, you could get that number even as high as I think 120% depending on their experience. So right now the tank has gone from 20 to 60 to 80 to 100 once everybody gets in. So now it's 100% efficient. We have a 5-man crew, and you can see their different positions. We have 2 people on guns. We have the tank commander. We have a tank loader, and we have a tank driver. And you can see it down here by these icons. And the tank still has issues because its field of view is still the main gun, which is up here. That pie slice of vision up here. The machine gun and the 50 cal is giving him wider view, but he's still almost completely blind behind him. He can't see things behind him. So if you add more people, more troops, right now the tank, if you look at his stats, it's a M4A Sherman 76 millimeter main gun, 50 cal machine gun, and 2 30 cal machine guns. One with the turret and one in the frame of the vehicle. It's got 22 and 64 armor, and we'll get into that later. But you can see here it can have a 5-man crew, up to a 5-man crew for 100% efficiency, and in brackets next to it down here is a 9 in brackets, means it can move a total of 9 troops into the battle, and 4 of them can be behind, being carried on the back of the tank. So let's grab these guys. Let's have them get into the tank. And you'll see when they get in or get on the back of the tank, it now, their view, their spotting capabilities will be relayed to the tank commander. and now he has almost 360 sight around the tank, as you can see from the fog of war being lifted all the way around. There's a small fog of war in between, but if you take direct control, move the turret around, and the machine guns, since they have some movement in their turrets, you get a full 360 degree as you move your turret around. Full vision of the battlefield. And if you want to even enhance that further, you could have several troops.
Ready for orders.
Grab some troops, have them move up with the tank. Now if we select everybody, they'll move up as a unit, and you can see there's full 360 vision around that tank. So they now have 360, and they'll move as a unit through the battlefield. And if you select the tank and want the tank to move out of danger and stay facing, have his armor face the battle, you can just select and right-click behind it. In small increments behind the tank will back up without rotating. It won't show its light armored rear end to the enemy. It'll back up, and its front armor will stay. And that's the way to leave the battlefield if there's danger on the battlefield. If you were to double-click, tell them to fast move, and you double-click from a long ways away, the tank will rotate and show its rear to the enemy, which is highly dangerous. So, again, when you're moving the tank, every commander should know that you leave the battlefield exposing your armor to the enemy. So you back up like that the proper way. Alright, so in this next segment I'll get into detail more about what the tank commander can do and some of the buttons and whatnot. Alright, so first of all, let's turn the tank off where the noise doesn't bother us. So if there's somebody inside the tank, you can use this button over here in the lower right, turn the engine off. And that will turn the engine off. Now, you can see when the buttons here, there's fuel. If you look down in the lower left, you can see this blue bar that shows how much fuel is in the tank. As I said earlier, some of these numbers, the 33 is the speed of the tank, the 5 and 9 is how many soldiers can move in the tank or be in the tank or on it. And then the main armor is 64 and 22, so the most armor is 64 millimeters, I think it's in millimeters. And the least amount is 22. It's got a 50 cal 76 millimeter main gun, and it's 100% efficiency. Once you start killing other tanks, it will show how many soldiers you kill and how many tanks you kill. Those numbers will show up inside here, and it'll also show you the veterancy number. The tank can go up to veterancy 5, I believe, which will give it enhanced stats, quite a few enhanced stats. So as it gets experience and victories on the battlefield, your tank will get more capable. Alright, so we showed you that it's got 3 different types of shells that this particular tank can carry. There can be as many as like 5 different types of shells, maybe even more in some tanks. Some tanks have more than one main gun. They may have 2 or 3 main guns plus machine guns. This is a fairly standard medium tank, and it's got the 3 types of shells, 1 main battle gun, and it's got 3 types of machine guns, and this button I'll describe later. It's when you're in arc mode for the main gun. But it's got a 50 cal, which if I select, that means if I go in direct control, I'm selecting and controlling the 50 cal, which can move in a certain arc, but it can't move 360. And it can move upwards to get aircraft you can see the turret, actually the little 50 cal gun moves up. So you can actually take down aircraft if you're fast on the draw. And then it has a 30 cal coax gun, which is built into the turret. So if I zoom in here and if I take direct control, you'll see those two holes by the turret that's moving. One of those holes is a machine gun built into the turret, and I can fire that, and it moves with the turret, has vision with the turret. And then if I get out of direct control and I go to the final machine gun here, it's the 30 cal that's built into the chassis of the tank. So direct control, you can see it moving. If you look and right here, you can see it moving in the chassis of the tank, and that has limited movement and just very limited view. And so that doesn't matter where the turret could be faced completely backwards, but this machine gun firing out the front here will stay in the front of the tank. So 3 different types of machine guns. One main battle gun gives you a lot of variation. You can tell your soldiers down here in the lower right who's on board and what they're doing. There's the driver, there's a gunner, there's a driver, there's a loader, and there's a commander, and the 3 people that are on the riding on the back of the tank. And if your tank is under stress, it's possibly going to be blown up, or it's on fire and you need to escape quickly, get your troops off quickly. You can get each soldier off one by one by right or left clicking on these little icons, but there's a faster, easier way to do it. So I'll load them back up. So if you select your tank and grab or hit your your G key, or hit this button here, that gives you a cursor, and they will get out wherever that cursor is if you left click. But don't click inside the orange circle, yellow circle. You won't get the icon, the cursor to move, and you'll be clicking, wondering how to get my troops out. I can't get them out. Why aren't they leaving? It's because your cursor's within inside that circle. It has to be outside that circle. So again, you hit your G key. Outside the circle, you get the icon, and they'll run out. So if I hit once, the passengers will leave. If I hit again in a different spot or same spot, you can get all the crew out in one shot. So that's a quick way to get your crew out. And then to get them all back in, you would select the crew, double click on the tank, they'll run to the tank.
Yes, sir.
And these guys are no longer needed on the back of the tank. You can send them back here. So that's how you get them in and out of the tank. And some of the basics about the guns, what armament or what firepower they have on the tank. In the next little clip, we're going to talk more about editing the tank. Alright, so there are different ways you can edit the tank. If right now we're in F1, but if we go to F3 and we select our tank again, sometimes, and I'll just explain this quickly, if you're in F1, I'll go back F1, and you select your tank and deselect it, and you go to F3, you see this little ring. So it's a little confusing, but this might save you some grief if you understand how this works. You can select things in F3 differently than you select them in F1. So I deselect everything. I'm in F3 right now, and if I select an item in F3, you'll see a little white, thin little white ring means it's selected in F3. You see that little thin white ring? Okay, I deselect. That's a different selection than if I go to F1 and my main game selection is the bright yellow circle, right? So when I switch modes, that selection is sticks, so it can be confusing. So I don't want to have my main game selection when I go to the F2 or F3 editor. So now I go to F3 editor. I select it for editing in F3 mode. I want to have it selected in F3 mode. So sometimes when you forget and you have it selected in F3 mode, you go to F1 mode and you select it, you actually have a double selection. You have the thin white ring and you have the yellow game ring. And this can cause some issues. So what you need to know is select and deselect when you're in F1 main mode. And when you go to F3 mode, make sure you select and deselect in F3, otherwise it'll carry over into the other modes, so which will save you from some grief once you understand that. So okay, so we're in F3. We want to select it in F3 mode. We got the thin line. We know it's selected. Now we can edit this vehicle because all its information will be on the left hand or the right hand side here in this pane over here. So things we can edit are a lot. We can down here we can tell what player, what side we want it on. So we can have on the enemy side red. We can have it on the green side, a neutral side, allies, a bunch of options. Right now it's just neutral, gray, neutral, player 0. If we want to have it use fuel in the game, meaning that fuel becomes a factor for your vehicles in the game, you can easily do that and control it here. And you can control how much fuel. So right now it's a full tank of 660. And that correlates to the blue bar that was down here. It's not showing now in this mode, but that blue bar is the amount of fuel in the tank. So let's turn that down to about 150 units. Hit enter. And now it's got maybe a quarter tank of fuel. And the rate it burns that fuel is in this next selector here, the rate. And this is a very slow burn rate, meaning you could play this tank could go up and down the whole map many times without being empty. And it doesn't become a real factor in a skirmish. If you want your gameplay to factor in fuel usage, which can be a great part of the game, because if you have a long thin map, you can have certain points in the map where you want to refuel, and if the Germans blow them up or whatever, you lose those areas. You lose the ability to easily refuel your tanks. You may have to bring special trucks up to refuel it, get barrels of fuel out and refuel, which could be dangerous. So it becomes a great part of the gameplay if you want to have it in the game. So I would crank this up to maybe 110 units, hit enter, and now that's going to burn fuel at a rate where if you have a 2-hour skirmish, you may have to refuel that tank twice. But you're in total control of that, which is great. So now I have a fast fuel burn rate. The fuel tank's only quarter full, which I'll show you the refueling. That's why I took the fuel, some of the fuel out. Also, one thing you must understand is it's only going to be, you're only going to use fuel now if you switch the control from AI to user. And you have to, if you bring other troops inside the tank and they're switched to AI, it may stop using fuel again. And it may switch to the AI. So another little caveat that if you find it confusing that you've set all this right and you set it to user, you go in the game and it's still not using fuel properly and you're wondering why, it's because possibly that crew that was set to user was replaced with a different crew that was set to AI. So just be aware that if you think you have everything set right but it's still not using fuel, you may have to go in again, reset it to user again, because the AI might have been overwritten by different troops that entered that tank. So that's something good to know. All right, that's how you set your fuel. So there are a lot of other things that you can change. The you can change the look of your tank, the details. So if I come down here almost to the bottom of this pane here, there's a little tab called Detail. It's set to random by default, which means every time you spawn this same tank, it's going to have a random amount of details on it. So this one spawned with the logs on the side and some bags on the turret and different pieces of equipment, the spare tracks here. But if I switch it from random, unswitch that check mark, and now I can be in control of, it's got 4 different types of details that I can have on this vehicle. Some have up to 10, 12, I think I've seen 15 maximum different little details on a tank you can turn on or off. So in this case, let's turn them all off first. So now we can see the logs are gone and some of the details are gone. And if I go back and turn them back on, you'll see them pop back in. And now we have all the details of the tank turned on. And that's just for visual variation. It's not so much a factor in the game, other than possibly a shell might hit. I don't know if it's modeled in the game or not with having the logs, but it's mainly a visual cue, some variation. So let's turn those back. Oh, we can leave these on. We'll just leave the details that way now. And then if we scoot up a little bit further, we have a shield, which if I look in front here, some tanks have full body shielding, and I think the Panther is a good example of that. If I select the Panther now, under shield, it can be turned off or on. And it's not this one, but some tanks have a full side iron skirts, but here it's just the front little caps for the tread. But that's what the shield is. It's, if I click this tank, let's see if it's got any shield. It's decals, detail. It doesn't look like it has a lot of shield detail. So, but anyway, sometimes if your shield is a large actual sheets of metal, steel, that protect the treads on some tanks. So that's cool. You can turn that off and on. And some of those are multi-part ones. And also, if you scroll up, so we're back on our Fury Sherman tank. If you go up, so a little bit from the bottom, if you scoot up from the bottom, there's something called text mods. And if you click that, you'll get usually 2 or 3 different variations. And one is usually a winter map or skin. And you have different types of paint jobs. And these can be cool for adding variation to your maps and or matching a winter scene. So that's what the text mods does. We'll set it back to default. And there are a few other things that you can change, but we'll just leave them for now. And that's how you can edit some things on your tank. One other thing you can edit, this particular tank doesn't have a number on it because it has a custom Fury paint job, I believe. But on this Panther, if I select that, you can see the number on the side, 606. Well, there's a feature here where you can actually change that number to whatever you want. And I turn the shield on there. If you just move up a little bit, you can see a number. And the number is 666 right now. And if I change that, see if we can change that to, say, 89. Hit enter. And it changed the number. And this may be a bit of a bug on this particular tank. But in some cases, you can actually change the number to exactly what you want. Let's try 22. Hit enter. So you get close to what you want. For some reason, maybe it needs a 3. It has to be 3 numbers, and that's why it's actually my mistake here. Let's go 205. So if I type in 205, hit enter, this should work. Now, so it seems to take the digits and put them in a random order. So it is, I put 250, but it just changed the order of the numbers. But in my opinion, it's still a great feature because you can change tanks to somewhat of a custom number. Let's go with 300. Hit enter, see what we get. So we get 030. So it's just another feature and something you can edit on your vehicles if there's a number on the vehicles, and sometimes the tanks have a large, nice numbers on them. And so that's part of editing as tank commander. You could edit your tank. In the next clip, we'll look at something else. All right, so let's take a look at how you refuel and rearm your tanks. And if you have fuel use turned on in your scenarios, you'll need to know how to refuel your tanks. So any troop can pop out of the vehicle, and let's have this one guy come out because we can control it with these individuals here. If we use G, they would all come out. But let's grab this guy. And another little caveat or gotcha that may save new players grief is this scenario here. Say he popped out of the tank, and I go and I select him, and I say move. He can move, but in some instances, if he's selected with the tank, they'll either both move or nobody will move. So what I'm saying is you just want to make sure you have just him selected and not two things. And sometimes that can screw up what you want to get done if you have two things selected. You go over here and it doesn't give you the right cursor to do something. It's because you have two things selected. So just be careful around vehicles. If you select something that's inside the vehicle circle, sometimes it will select both your troop and the vehicle, and that'll cause you issues. So I just want to mention that. So now we just have him selected properly. We can tell now that our tank only has like a little more than a quarter tank, somewhere roughly a quarter tank, as we changed that in the editor like I just showed you. So he could use some fuel before he goes out to do battle. How do you do it? So you take a soldier, and he can go to any vehicle and grab, steal fuel and gas from a motorcycle, other tanks, a jeep, a gas can, wherever there's modeled fuel in the game, he can go and take some gas. So also in his own tank, though, before him having to look and steal for gas somewhere else, in the tank, if you go back to the tank, and if you hold down the X key and left click, you'll see that the inventories open up, and inside the tank, if I select or drag over this gas can, which inside the tank has 60, you see this little number here, it has 60 units of fuel in this little gas can. I'm going to give it to my soldier and click out of there. Now the soldier has a gas can. You're saying, well, where is it? I don't see it. He just picked it up. He should have it. Well, it's not going to be active. His gun is active right now. That's what's in his hand because that's what's highlighted in his inventory. And the inventory button is here. Or you can hit the I button. So to get him to hold the gas can, just double click on the gas can in his inventory. Now he picks it up and you can see it. He's holding his gas can and he's ready to use the gas can for refueling. So just make sure you have whatever item that you want to use, make sure it's live and highlight. Sometimes it defaults to the gun. You have to make sure you change that. So now that he's got a full tank of gas in his hand, or a full can of gas, he has a new cursor appear depending on what you move your cursor over. So normally nothing happens when you hover over full tanks. Those tanks have full fuel, so I don't get any option because they're full. He can't do anything because his can is full. But if I now hover over the gas or the tank that I just popped out of, it needs gas, so it's given me a funnel cursor saying that, yeah, you can pour some gas in here because it's only got a quarter tank. You can easily use that can of gas. So if I is it right click the mouse, he'll pour it in as long as you get that little icon there. See, now it's switched to a blue drop, and what that's telling you is that he's now poured. You can tell if you look in his inventory, it's got no number here, so he poured out all the fuel. There's no fuel in his can. He poured it into the tank, and now it's giving an icon change to a drop, a blue drop, meaning if I right click again, now he's taking fuel out. So, and that it'll change back to a funnel, meaning he can pour it back in. So that's basically how refueling works in the game. But there's a little more to it, and you don't have to use just a gas can. You can have him. He's got a full tank of a can of gas again. Let's have him move over here. And I'm just going to select the can and drop it out of, so I clicked on it and dragged it out. So he's dropped the can. Somebody else can pick that can up and fill up or get gas, whatever they need. But if you go to this, I'm going to have him go over here and to this truck where there's a large barrel of gas, and it's got 500 in this barrel. So if I select that and drag it, he's got enough room in his inventory that he's just picked up that big fuel can barrel. Now he's got 500. Now you're not going to have the option to move it over if his inventory is all full or if you don't have enough room to drag it. So click out of there. Now he's got a big barrel of fuel. He's going to move slowly. You can't have him run with that big. He won't run with that full barrel of gas. But he has enough to, you get the icon to fill up that tank almost completely. So if I right click, he'll go over there and fill that up. And the same basic idea goes for ammunition, which I'll show just in a second. So he's going over there and he's going to pour 500 units of gas into the vehicle. You can see now he's poured the whole thing in. The number is gone. If there wasn't enough room, it would have stopped at maybe 200 or whatever. But there was enough so that the entire barrel of gas. So going to have him move the gas, barrel away. Going to have him set it down by dragging that out of the inventory. We now click on the vehicle and he's got a full tank of gas. And if I have the commander turn on the engine, as soon as the engine is fully engaged, then I get the move icon. While the engine is warming up, I just had a red cross. I couldn't move, but wait for it to fully move. Sometimes it's frustrating. You turn it on and you want to move quick, but it takes a while for the engine to start up. And once you get your move icon, you can see down here at the blue bar is losing. The number is going down fairly rapidly. And I'll have him back up. And you can see the number, the rate of fuel consumption is rather high. So the green bar is actually moved. You can see some movement there. So it's using gas properly inside the game. So that's perfect. And we can turn the engine off again. And now we can see in the inventory of our tank that we have, a full load of machine gun ammunition and shells. We have some explosives and we have 2 repair kits. But what if we need some more shells? How does that work? Well, we can take our soldier here, move him out of the way, and grab this soldier. And again, I clicked on the tank instead of the soldier. Just make sure you got the right item. So this soldier actually has different shells he picked up from this tank or that tank on the field scavenging for ammunition. They can be used as explosives because if a sniper or a large caliber weapon like a rifle hits these, you can put them on the ground in a pile and you can actually use that as an explosive device or a trap. But that's another story for another video. But he has scavenged 4 different rounds of main gun rounds. And now, how do you know? Because there's literally hundreds of different types of ammunition in the Assault Squad 2. How do you know which ammunition goes into which tank? It can become very confusing. And this shell here is a 76 millimeter, and it's a high explosive. This one's a 76 millimeter armor piercing round. This one is a 7.5 centimeter German APCR round. So you have all these different types of shells, and obviously they're not going to fit. They have to have the right shell for the right tank and gun, right? So the inventory helps you do that, and it's a very handy thing every commander should know, every player of this game should know. If I scrounged up a bunch of stuff on the battlefield, say my tank was out of shells, needed some ammunition, I can just go and get some shells that I think might work. I can take my soldier and, hit the X key, have them look at my tank inventory, interface with it. Now, here's my tank inventory right here on the right box, inventory. On the left is a soldier. There's subtle difference here that can help you manage things a lot easier than trying to figure it out yourself. Some of these shells have a blue background and some have a gray background. Well, the ones that are going to work for your tank and your gun have the blue background. So I know I can take this shell. I can take this shell by clicking on it, right-clicking. If I take this shell, I can take it, but it's not blue. It's not going to work in my tank and my gun. So I'm going to take that back. So have anything that has a blue background will work with what you currently want to drag into your vehicle. And it's the same thing with a gun. If you click a soldier, generally, if I have him put his gun away, if I click on his rifle, the ammunition is blue to match the rifle, so I know this ammunition is the right one for this rifle. So when things are blue, it means you can use it. All right, we've learned several things there. In the next segment, we'll learn even more.